My name is Chris Paul. I'm the CEO of Bald Eagle Gold Corp, which trades on the TSX Venture under the symbol BIG. We are focused on our newly acquired 100% owned Hercules silver project in Western Idaho, which is a 5.5 kilometer long, nearly pure play silver CRD system with over 300 drill holes and a historical resource which hasn't seen exploration in close to 40 years.
Chris, thank you very much for the introduction. Short and sweet, succinct, and very clear. I like it. I also like that the ticker, BIG, big. And that's presumably what your plans are. But sorry for the bad pun. How did you come to this project?
Well, that's a bit of a long story, so I won't take you too deep down that rabbit hole. But my background is on the technical side. So I'm a geologist by training. I've worked in precious metals exploration for close to 15 years now, and I had actually founded a technical services company in 2015 with my partner called Ridgeline Exploration. So that we actually sold to Gold Spot Discoveries last year. And so kind of during the transition period, I'd say probably about 3 years ago, I got involved in Idaho. And I realized there was some tremendous geological potential down there and a major lack of competition from other junior companies. So I for the time being, have essentially decided to focus my career down there. I was introduced to the asset through part of my network down there, and we were able to eventually get a deal done. About 18 months, but we eventually negotiated a deal to acquire 100% interest in the project.
And is Bald Eagle Corporation a kind of new vehicle specifically for this, or is it a shell that you've backed it into?
No, it is a shell that we backed it into. It's not a shell that I was involved with building either. Actually, some of my network in Vancouver and Toronto had put it together. It had actually begun as a cannabis company, turned Nevada gold deal, hence the name Bald Eagle Gold Corp, which, long story short, didn't work out. I had the Hercules project ready to be vended into a public company, and this one made a lot of sense. So we made the vend happen. That was last August. And after that was done, because I had just sold my previous company to Gold Spot, basically the guys that put it together asked me to join as CEO. And we've since been sort of building a team around it. So you'll notice if you look at our previous news releases, we've added a few more pretty strong members to the team. So there will be a bit of a rebranding effort, little spoiler alert coming soon here with the presentation, the website, and a few more things that are going to reflect the company's new focus going forward.
Yeah, so you've got Tom Hendrickson on board and Louis De Silva, right now, who I've known for ages.
So both, very, very strong backgrounds in mining and exploration. So Louis, actually, he's coming off his former role as president and CEO of Andean Precious Metals, which is a silver producer, a Bolivian silver producer. So he's bringing obviously some very strong operational experience to the company, particularly in silver. And Tom Hendrickson, who is a geologist with a very wonderful career of discoveries. 2018, Tom actually won the Colin Spence Award through AMEBC for global excellence in mineral exploration. So Tom has made a long list of discoveries, which I can't name them all, but I know the most recent was the Hot Maiden in Turkey. So very successful career. He has actually done a lot in Idaho as well. He founded Midas Gold Corp with Tom Elliott from Haywood, which is now Perpetua Resources. So that's an Idaho gold project that's going to be going into production. And full circle, Tom did his PhD on the Hercules in the 1970s. And,
did he? Did he? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let's Oh, and you've also just raised some money with Crescat. Was that Quentin Hennig? Did he get involved in this? Or did you just go through kind of Crescat straight?
Yeah, no, I didn't know Quentin or any of the Crescat guys before this. I was doing meetings. You know, this is obviously a relatively new deal. We haven't really promoted it yet, and we were doing meetings with some funds, people like Crescat. I was lucky enough to get a meeting with Quentin, and you know, he obviously really liked it and decided that Crescat was going to make an investment into the company. So, you know, that's obviously, you know, a really big vote of confidence in the project and the company, and you know, essentially, you know, if it gets Crescat stamp of approval, you know, they're generally pretty decent, half decent projects. So yeah, we're pretty happy with that.
Good. Well, let's get granular. Let's have a look at the project. Hercules, Fishpond, Grade Creek. It's a nice name for a silver play, Grade Creek. Could you kind of put up a map and give me some orientation of where it is? Idaho. I was looking at Revival Gold and Freeman Gold, but I think they're on the other side of the state for you.
Yeah. So we're in western Idaho. The project's located about 2.5 hours northwest of Boise. There's actually very good road access and highways leading to the project. There's power line infrastructure on the property. Just trying to think if I can pull up the presentation, but I don't really have a very good location map yet. But it's essentially sort of west central Idaho.
Okay. And then when I looked at your location map, the first thing I wanted clarification on, because I didn't quite understand it, was surface rights and the implications for exploration and permits. It's because Idaho has got this funny permitting thing. So if you could just kind of talk me through that, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, and it's a really important point. And again, got to be careful not to go down that rabbit hole because, you know, land titles can get quite complex. But long story short, Idaho is ranked, you know, a top jurisdiction by the Fraser Institute. But just because you're in Idaho doesn't necessarily mean you're on state land, because, you know, a lot of Idaho and pretty much every state is actually mostly federal land, which is either the BLM or the Forest Service. Now, in this case, the project actually dates back to 1965, when this was all the land that the project, the resource, the drilling was actually on ranch land. And so the ranch did a deal with the company that we just acquired. And the deal was, we're going to give you all the mineral rights, and we are going to give you the right to use the surface, which we own, to drill, to build roads, to build a mine. They even set aside a parcel of land for the company to build a mill site on. So that is basically the background on that slide and those surface rights that we have. So these were recorded deeds, so they're of record. The ranch subsequently sold the land, sold the surface, subject to those rights that I just mentioned that the mining company retains. So actually the state, interestingly, now owns the land, which is another positive because, as I mentioned, you know, there's federal land and there's state land, and the feds can be quite difficult to deal with. So, you know, being on actual Idaho state land, you know, which is subject to historical mining and exploration rights, gives us, you know, pretty good certainty when it comes to permitting and development.
So you're on state land, and that state land has got grandfathered surface rights associated with the mining title.
That's correct. Yep.
Good. Right. So what is it? Well, you said CRD, carbonate replacement deposit. Can you just there's a huge amount of kind of historic data, isn't there? So it's been worked since the 1960s, and in your presentation you've got 18 drill holes, and they've got some nice intersections, which, for example, kind of 30 meters at about 330 something grams per ton silver with a little bit of lead and zinc as well. And within that, there are narrow zones between 4 and 10 meters with much higher grade. So what's your approach at the moment? And talk to me about the system and how you're exploring for it.
Yep. So yeah, as you mentioned, the deposit type that we are pinning on this is a carbonate replacement deposit. So that's very important because CRDs are often incredibly large. And the analogy actually that we have here is a fairly big one. It's the Hermosa Taylor deposit in Arizona, which is now today it's a world-class silver lead zinc deposit. But before the big discovery at Hermosa, it was essentially identical to what we have at the Hercules now. And what that is both projects are basically historical mines with were historical resource at Hermosa in high-grade silver in a rhyolite volcanic, a Jurassic Age rhyolite volcanic at surface. Now, the stratigraphy at our project and Hermosa is identical. So below those Jurassic rhyolites, at Hercules, we have what's called the Seven Devils group. And the Seven Devils is interbedded andesite volcanics, andesite tubes, I should say, and limestones. And that's really important, the limestones, because the same stratigraphy happens at Hermosa. So when the big discovery was made at Hermosa, it was in the late 2000s when Arizona Mining came in. They did some deeper drilling below the rhyolite hosted silver lead zinc mineralization at surface, and they got into the limestones, which is a much better host rock for CRD style mineralization. It's much more reactive. You can get much more massive replacement, and that's ultimately what made that a world-class deposit. So what I'm getting at here is deeper down in the stratigraphy at the Hercules, below the rhyolite is the Seven Devils, which is andesite and limestone, and that has never been tested. So this was drilled. Go ahead.
Let's going to get my head around this. So CRD, carbonate replacement deposits, you need to have the carbonate to replace, and in a rhyolite you don't have that. So when you say that the target is the carbonate replacement deposits, effectively you're saying it's the lower horizons which is your primary goal here. Is it oversimplistic to say that there are these in the Seven Devils package, there are intercalated limestones and andesitic tuffs, and then through that has come an extrusive phase, or do you have a feeder zone that you can recognize, or is it some kind of overflow, in which case how would the carbonates down here be replaced?
Yeah, no, and that's the obvious question. And I'll try and keep it relatively simple, and I have to because we haven't yet drilled this project ourselves. It was last drilled in the 1980s, so obviously not a ton of technical information from those reports. But all of the mineralization at the Hercules occurs at the very base of the rhyolite unit, where it is in contact with the underlying Seven Devils. Now remember, the Seven Devils is carbonates and volcanics. So what you've had at that along that contact is that's where the replacement style of mineralization has occurred. And basically the really interesting thing that we've recently found is in the fall, we did a big regional geochemical program, regional soil geochemical program. And what that uncovered was a very large, roughly 2 kilometer diameter, copper, molybdenum, and gold soil anomaly immediately adjacent to all this CRD style silver, lead, zinc, manganese mineralization. So the model that we are applying after making this discovery in the soils this fall, because most CRDs are almost always fed by a copper porphyry system, and we believe we've now identified the likely source of that copper porphyry system adjacent to the east. And the model is, of course, fluids, hydrothermal fluids are coming off of that porphyry system. They're traveling some distance. At surface, and we're talking less than 100 meters from the surface, is where the old timers found the replacement style mineralization at the base of the rhyolite in contact with those 7 doubles, carbonates, and andesites.
So the rhyolite effectively acts as a permeability barrier, acts as a kind of an aquitard. So you had an underlying fluid system, a hydrothermal system that pooled and concentrated potentially corrosive or acidic fluids there, which enabled, when the chemistry changes, perhaps the temperature and perhaps pressure as well, on contact with those limestones, means preferential precipitation at that point.
Which is interesting. You mentioned that aquitard, that fluid dam, because there's often jasperoid development at the top of the mineralization. And jasperoid, for your listeners, is basically massive silica replacement with some iron to give it sort of a red coloration, but it is pretty much fluid impermeable. And so it certainly very likely acted as a fluid barrier and focused the fluids below that fluid barrier and along that contact at the base of the rhyolite. And we don't have access to any of the historical drill core, so we haven't actually seen this yet. But on surface, there are outcrops we can sample, and of course you don't get the best look at the textures from surface samples. But what we do see is replacement, and it's almost always incredibly strongly brecciated. So you'll see essentially massive oxide mineralization, massive goethite and oxide mineralization with clasts of the rhyolite all through it in the mineral outcrops.
Nice, great. So what's the plan now?
So the plan now is close this financing and get some money in the bank. We have a 3,000 meter drill program that we've planned. We are going to be obviously procuring a drill contractor. So timing of that, we haven't yet set in stone. Obviously, we're going to look to close this financing first and start to make some announcements. But that is the next step. There's also another hole which we may add, a deeper hole, which is going to be targeting that copper porphyry target. So that 3,000 meter program, the average hole depth is only 100 meters. A lot of this is going to be essentially drilling within the historical resource area, stepping out on the historical resource area, but it's all at surface, very shallow. So our first phase of drilling is going to be relatively shallow. It's going to be about roughly 50% within the resource and stepping out from the existing resource, 50% pure exploration drilling as well.
Can you put up a map, please? I'd like to see a plan view of when you talk about the resource and the step outs.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, so this is a plan view. Can you see that well?
Yes, I can. Crystal.
Perfect. So we tried to keep it relatively simple, but what you're looking at here is in the background. This unit in yellow is the rhyolite. So this is the surface host of the mineralization. There's a lot of post-mineral cover as well, I should mention. So there's post-mineral basalts, and there's also post-mineral sediments completely surrounding it. Now, the drill holes, those 300 drill holes I mentioned, which represents 28,000 meters of drilling that's already been done here, is represented by these points. So this map has been styled, but what you're looking at is a plot of the silver grade times the width in the historical intercepts across the property. So the warmer colors, obviously representing some of the better holes. The resource area is right here. And I actually have an image of a block model that Goldspot Discoveries put together for us. So I can actually jump back a slide here. So this is zoomed in on that resource area. So the resource area is comprised of 2 zones, the Hercules adit, which you're looking at on the left, and the Fishpond. I'm going to jump back a little bit to sort of explain what's going on. So the rhyolite unit is folded. So this is basically the one limb of the fold. This is the other limb of the fold. And the fold is plunging to the northwest.
Synclinal. It's a syncline. Anticlinal. Okay.
It's anticlinal. It's anticlinal.
Okay.
Exactly. All right. So we've got this anticline that's plunging off to the northwest here. And the resource area has been mostly drilled near the hinge area. Interestingly, they did not actually drill the hinge area itself. All right, so let's jump back here.
Before you go there, when you talk about the mineralization in the rhyolite, how does that? Because the rhyolite isn't a carbonate. So is it in fractures? Is it disseminated? Is it structurally controlled within corridors within the rhyolite? Or are you talking about, is it kind of just accumulated at the base of the rhyolite
Yep.
on the contact with the seven devils?
So we actually see that the majority of mineralization is typically at the base of the unit, at the contact. There are other layers within the rhyolite as well that are carbonate rich. So you see replacement textures in those carbonate rich layers, but you also see a lot of structural preparation in the unit as well. So it was highly fractured. So when those fluids came through, they basically traveled through that stockwork of fracture network and brecciated it, and basically just there was a lot of fracture fill and brecciation as well.
Okay, thank you. So effectively, the rhyolite predates the mineralizing event by, it was brittle by the time the mineralizing event occurred.
Correct. Yes. Yes. So I'll minimize my share screen here in a second, but
Yeah.
I did just want to quickly show this this block model because it does give some insight into what the historical resource is currently looking like at the moment, and areas where we do plan on drill testing extensions out. So yeah. What we see here in this 3D image essentially is the fold that's plunging towards us in this image. So this is one limb of a fold that's dipping off in this direction. This is the other limb of the fold that's dipping off in that direction. So yeah, exactly. And so very clearly it is there is a stratigraphic control in a sense to this mineralization. It is stratified within that layer. So there are multiple areas where it's still open. So that entire hinge area has not been tested by any drilling. The drill holes only went down, the historical drilling only went down 100 meters. So the down dip extensions are certainly open as well. And it is open along strike as well. So we definitely think there's very good possibilities for expanding on this resource.
And I like it, really nice. What about the controls and mineralization beneath? Perhaps could you stop sharing just for a moment? Thank you. So if you've got a planar contact between the seven devils and the rhyolite, have you got any understanding on what are the controls of the mineralization within the seven devils? As in, is there a vertical component, or is it a location of because you've got carbonates which are laterally continuous, but you're going to have preferential corridors for mineralization underneath. So there must be some kind of vertical control on this, some kind of structural a feeder structure, some kind of structural component, or some element. Have you got a handle on that, or is it too early?
Yeah, long story short, it's too early. We have a gentleman by the name of Warren Pratt, who is a fairly well-known mapper. He's going to be up here in August. we just picked up this project. The last time this project was worked was in the 1980s. So yeah, long story short, we do not yet have a handle on the feeder structures, a lot of the structural controls. So Warren is going to be focused on structural mapping, getting a handle on those structural controls and those feeders, as well as mapping out the stratigraphy, which is going to be very important because ultimately it's going to be that intersection between those feeder structures that we just talked about and the favorable stratigraphy we know is deeper down in the Seven Devils. Those are going to form exceptional targets at depth that we're going to be going after. Now, to answer your question, there is mineralization all throughout the Seven Devils. If you want, I can share screen and show you the copper anomaly, but maybe that's too early.
Go on, whip it up.
Okay.
And what did Tom Henriksen do his PhD on when he was in this area?
So Tom's PhD was focused on not just the Hercules, but a much larger area. So the Hercules is within what's called the Heath Mining District, and it's basically a northeast southwest trending belt, a volcanic arc. So it's a Triassic-Jurassic volcanic arc of porphyry copper mineralization and associated silver, lead, zinc mineralization. Now, in the 70s, when Tom was doing his PhD, there was no CRD. I believe my understanding is by the name of Peter McGaugh came up with that a little bit more recently. But yeah, Tom's PhD was focused all the way down to what's called the Mineral District, which is probably about, I want to say maybe 50 to 100 miles southwest. So it was a pretty sort of broad-based PhD study. He also hates it, by the way. He doesn't like his old work. It's part of the reason he wants to come back, is he says, "Oh, I go back and I read my old work, and I think it's terrible. So I'd like to go back in there and fix it up."
They'd only just worked out plate tectonics at that stage. I mean, John Dewey is still writing his papers in the early 70s. On plate tectonic theory. So yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of improvements in science since then. So thank you. Yeah, do show me the porphyry, the copper anomaly, kind of spatially related to.
Okay. All right. Can you see the map here on the left? Okay, so what we're looking at here, for reference, this has got all the geology on it now, and for reference, this yellow unit here, there's the rhyolite. So this is the rhyolite, which most of the CRD mineralization has been discovered in to date. To the south, we've got Columbia River flood basalt, so this is post-mineral cover. We also have, above the Jurassic rhyolite, we also have post-mineral sedimentary unit. This is called the brownite. So you've got an angular unconformity on top of the rhyolite, and you've got these brownite rocks. So this, sort of further complicates. So what we're dealing with is essentially just a little window of the rhyolite, which is exposed at surface, which is what the old timers found. They put a mine in at Hercules at it, and then did all the drilling from the 60s to the 80s. The Seven Devils group is shown in green here. So maybe I'll even back out a little bit further in my description, because what's really interesting, if we zoom out even further, and I'm sorry, I don't have a map of this, but if you just imagine to the southeast even further, there is a large intrusive complex here. And EMX royalties actually entered the picture, not this past summer, but the one before. So their subsidiary, their US subsidiary, Bronco Creek, just staked 200 claims adjacent to us to the southeast over this IXL prospect. So the IXL is copper, molybdenum, gold porphyry system in a intrusive complex at surface. As you basically move northwest, so in between EMX and our property here, there is a copper skarn system that's owned by a private guy in Idaho. But copper skarns typically form, right next to the porphyry. It's a very high temperature thing, copper gold skarn. And then in the Seven Devils, you'll see there's all these little showings: methane, little gem, yellow bride. It's probably hard to read, but all these little things are old mines. So old adits that were put in turn of the century. And we have a lot of these reports from the Idaho Geological Survey from the early 1900s. And what they described is they were mining these limestone units, which had been replaced with, typically at surface, it's massive oxide minerals, so zinc oxides and lead oxides, and with large amounts of silver in it. And so when we did our soil sampling in the fall, what we did not expect to get back was this roughly 2-kilometer diameter copper anomaly in the soils, which is grading up to over 3,000 parts per million copper, or up to 200 parts per billion gold, and around 20 parts per million molybdenum, and of course, probably partially covered by the basalts here. So this is sort of our heat center, our heat and fluid source that we've interpreted on the project. So when I talk about the deeper testing deeper down below this rhyolite, I'm referring to essentially this area here, which is, you can't see it on surface because you've got these post-mineral sediments which obscure a lot of things on surface. But in between the silver, lead, zinc CRD that's been defined on surface with shallow, 100-meter drill holes, and what we interpret to be the porphyry copper source of all the fluids and heat, we know that this is Seven Devils. We know this contains limestones interbedded with andesites, and we're certainly going to be trying to get a handle on the stratigraphy with Warren and get a handle on what the structural controls are, and essentially this whole area between the copper and the known CRD is another area that we'll be targeting, looking for those stratigraphically deeper extensions.
Thank you very much. Where is the, can you just give me a quick reminder of the position and the size of the historic resource? I know it's not up to date, but just to come to understand what they had in their head.
Yeah, so when you're looking for the resource, just look in that hinge area of the rhyolite. So right up in here, Hercules had it, and the Fishpond.
And what was that resource?
That I am not allowed to talk about in public yet. So this is part of the reason, this is part of our drill program this summer, is going to be doing that confirmation drilling so that we can actually talk numbers. There's some other work that we're going to do as well. I'll sort of go off on a little slight tangent here, but we did find almost all of the historical drill pulps in storage, covered in mold because they've been sitting there for almost 40 years. But there is storage in the nearby town, a storage shed, and they had all of the historical drill pulps. So we've actually started rerunning some of those, and our QP has been looking at that, and they are basically matching, bang on, within reasonable error what the historical values are. But that's part of our program, is getting that historical resource 43-101 compliant. And
you can tell what drill holes they are then, they are labeled sufficiently well for you to be able to say this is drill hole X.
Yeah. When we acquired the project, the former geologist actually had all 300 drill logs still in paper format. It comprised about 10 banker's boxes full of data. We picked that up in September, and with about 3-4 people, it took about another 3 months to digitize everything. It represents about 18,000 rows of assay data in Excel, collar tables. There's an incredible amount of historical data that was still kept, so that was very fortunate.
This sounds great. I'm really excited for you. I think this is a wonderful project. I've got to go now. We had some technical problems at the start of the call, but just in summary, can you give me the kind of the milestones that you're going to be looking to tick off during 2022?
Yeah, absolutely. So we expect to close this financing by the end of next week. And once that is closed, we're going to be officially announcing our drill plans for this summer, which we do plan to execute on this summer. I expect that to be a minimum of 3,000 meters of drilling. So following that, we expect to be releasing drill results into the market late summer into early fall. Along with that, there's going to be some grassroots stuff as well. We're doing more soil sampling because the soil sampling has been very effective here, has defined a much larger system. So we're continuing to expand the system with soil samples. One thing I did not mention in the call was we actually found an extension of the rhyolite underneath that post-mineral basalt 2 kilometers to the south. So the previous extent of the system defined by drilling was 3.5 kilometers. And they stopped when they hit the basalt. But there's a valley 2 kilometers to the south, and we thought, well, let's run a reconnaissance line. And sure enough, we found an incredible extension of that rhyolite. So we know it goes under that basalt. So we're going to be doing more of that soil sampling, continuing to expand the system. Of course, Warren's going to be out there, figuring out the geology, figuring out the structural controls, figuring out the stratigraphy, getting us more targets. Drill results are going to be getting pumped out in the fall. And as I mentioned, once we've got the confirmation drilling complete, the Porphyry analysis complete, we're going to look to start doing a maiden resource calculation for 0101 compliant on that historical resource. So at least we can tell to the market what we've got and how it's expanding.
Bring it on. I look forward to hearing the news.
Thanks very much, Merlin.